along the way, during that 20-year marriage, I was sort of an absentee father and not really knowing that I was. I thought that
Mm.
I was involved with the kids. We homeschooled our kids. They were around the house a lot, and they even helped me in the business. They'd come to the gym and they'd help out with things. And I
Hmm.
really tried to live this integrated life. But what I mean by absent is that I was always in my head living in the future. I
Hmm.
was always goal oriented, which is, it's taught as this very positive thing to be goal oriented. But
Right.
I was so goal oriented that I was really missing out on being present and available for my relationships.
By now, we've all heard of using the SMART model to set goals to be more productive. But what if there was a less rigid, easier way to be both more productive and happier? Well, then stick around because in this episode of the Mental Health Toolbox, we're talking with personal development and fitness coach, author of Stop Setting Goals, and creator of the Lyceum Method, Cody Limbaugh. You can learn more about his work by checking out the show notes and the description below, where you can find his book and relative links. All right, so let's go. Hello, Cody, and thank you so much for making time today to be on the Mental Health Toolbox. I'm really excited for everything you have to share with our audience today. And let's go ahead and jump in. You want to tell us a little bit about who you are and what it is you're passionate about and what you do?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on the show. And yeah, so I have been in the fitness industry for around 20 years altogether. I owned my own gym for about 17 years. And so I really come from a fitness background. And in many years of coaching, because it's been a hands on project, my gym was, for most of those years, a CrossFit gym. We did a lot of personal training, weightlifting, powerlifting, lots of specific niche type of coaching like that. I coached various sports teams, and even one of my students went on to the Olympics eventually. And so I've been a very hands-on coach. And in those years of coaching, I've noticed quite a few patterns of how people respond to various forms of motivation. And it really made me begin to rethink a lot of the ways that we are taught to set goals and sort of the process that is the right way, in quotes, air quotes, to
Mm-hmm.
approach goals and lifestyle changes. And so I can't claim to have, a high degree of education when it comes to psychology or anything like that, but just hands on the, boots on the ground kind of experience of helping people make life changes has made me rethink a lot of the things that we're taught in typical motivational settings or business or self-help. So right now, I'm refocusing our business a little bit to be more of a personal development company that just happens to use fitness as a tool to introduce people to these concepts.
Wow. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. I'm glad that you are because I'm definitely one person who could benefit from that and definitely could use more fitness as well.
Yeah.
That's an
Wouldn't
ongoing
we all?
journey.
Yeah.
I lost the pandemic weight, but then slowly creeping back on. So I need to get back with it.
Right. That's how it is.
Yes. So yeah, I 100% agree with you. We can be very highly minded, but of no earthly good, so to speak, if we are all philosophy and no action and no experience, right? Because we learn through doing, we learn through imperfect, messy action. And every self help book I've read is pretty much echoing the same thing, right?
Mhm.
James Clear, right? 1% better, practice, do. We do what we improve what we measure, right?
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So about 10 years or so ago, I was journaling one day, and I was just at a point in my life where I was really frustrated because at that time I was probably in my early 30s, and I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit about me. I remember selling obsidian rocks when I was about 6 years old, trying to sell them door to door. And
Right.
so I've always kind of had this entrepreneurial bent. And because of that, I've been exposed to a lot of personal development books and business books and that kind of thing, and was really entrenched in the SMART goal paradigm. So,
Hmm.
for those of you in the audience who might not be familiar with SMART goals, it's an acronym that stands for specific, measurable, attainable, or actionable, depending on your acronym, relevant, and then time bound. And being entrenched in that, I kept setting goals, but I would often fall short or miss the mark. Or if I set goals that were really attainable, sometimes it would be a kind of a shallow victory. I'd feel like, well, that didn't even need to be a goal. That was just going to happen anyway,
Right.
And so it was always this weird tug of war of setting goals that were really inspiring, but that would cause a lot of anxiety, or they would be too attainable and just not feel like I had any victory, in it. And this constant yo-yo. And it's interesting because I was entrenched in these concepts, but really blaming myself. Like, oh, I'm procrastinator, I'm lazy, I lose focus, I this, I that, and just a lot of self-deprecating thoughts on why I wasn't achieving and living the type of life that I really wanted to live. And I think the worst part of all of that was how it affected relationships, because I have distinct memories. So I was married once before. I have since divorced and remarried, but I had 3 kids with my first wife, who are all adult children now, and all doing well, and it's a happy ending. But along the way, during that 20-year marriage, I was sort of an absentee father, and not really knowing that I was. I thought that I was involved with the kids. We homeschooled our kids. They were around the house a lot, and they even helped me in the business. They'd come to the gym and they'd help out with things. And I really tried to live this integrated life. But what I mean by absent is that I was always in my head living in the future. I was always goal oriented, which is, it's taught as this very positive thing to be goal oriented.
Right.
But I was so goal oriented that I was really missing out on being present and available for my relationships. And, I just remember, I write about in my book that there's this one memory I have that's just very good illustration, where we're actually spending some time at the beach, and I'm playing soccer with my son, and my daughter at the time was just a baby, like eating sand and that kind of thing. And from an outsider's perspective, it probably looked like this happy family enjoying the beach. But I remember specifically that I was so stressed out in my head. All I could think about the whole time I was there was, I should be working. I should be doing this other thing. I should be recruiting some people for my business. Worried about bills, we're behind the due, we're, financially struggling. All this kind of stress was really where my mind was, even though my body was there with the family, So this kind of reflection, I just remember sitting down, and I have the journal, thankfully, from, it's probably more than 10 years ago now, come to think of it. I'm older than I think. 47 now.
Funny how time goes by. Huh?
Yeah. But in my early 30s, I sat down with a journal one day, and I thought, what if I just stopped setting goals altogether? Like, how can I reframe my intentions and my vision for my life in a way that is not so restrictive, and have this repeating pattern of setting goal, missing, feeling defeated, setting goal, missing, feeling defeated. And so I just began to play with ideas of, well, maybe I can just focus on daily practices. Like, if I want to be somebody who is fit, for instance, then I just focus on today's workout. I focus on building the practice of working out. If I want to be financially successful, then I can build daily habits around, smart management of money, and that type of thing. And it took quite a while to distill these ideas, but finally, about 3 years ago, I wrote a book about it, and I decided to call it the Lyceum Method. And the Lyceum is Aristotle's school. Yeah. So Aristotle's school is very eclectic, and I'm a very eclectic interest person. My career is in fitness and leadership, but I'm also a pencil artist, and I live in the country, and we do some ranching and farming, and so it's a very eclectic mix. And I wanted to live my life sort of all in one basket instead of all these disparate things. So anyway, that's why I called it the Lyceum Method, is that I uh, developed an approach that instead of setting specific goals that are time bound, to measure progress on a trajectory. Am I heading the right direction? And if I'm heading the right direction, then I know I'm heading toward the vision that I really want for my life. But in the meantime, I'm experiencing a sense of victory every day because I know that this practice or this habit or this intention that I'm living out day to day is in the right direction. And that's a sense of victory that, you don't necessarily get with a goal, because until you've achieved the goal, you haven't really achieved it, right? So it's kind of like
Mm-hmm.
work, 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 sacrifice, sacrifice, delay gratification. And then I'll be
Mm-hmm.
happy when I finally lose 20 pounds or whatever
Isn't
that
that the
is,
truth? Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to
Wow.
break free from that paradigm of I'll be happy when,
Mm-hmm.
and just choose to go ahead and be happy now and
I
and get
love
on that
that.
right,
Yeah.
yeah, that right trajectory.
That's great because oftentimes that is the kind of rigid kind of setup, right? We set ourselves up for and no fault of our own. That's what we're taught, right? As being,
Mhm.
high producers, for example, is that, or if we want to quote break the mold or think outside the box or do your own thing, that, or even if you're in a, a 9 to 5 and, you want to be, the linchpin, right? Of
Mhm.
of the line staff or your role as an employee. Oftentimes we think we have, we're taught to think, or we teach ourselves to think in these very rigid terms, like you said, delayed gratification, audacious goals, and that we can't really, we have to kind of hold our breath and
Right.
keep our head
Yeah.
down until we knock that off, and we can breathe again until we set the next one, right? And then hold our breath again. And that kind of works right against what you were saying is the importance of being present, right? Because we're
Mhm.
future tripping. As a therapist, oftentimes use that term for anxiety. The anxious mind is future tripping, right?
Mhm.
And if we think about anxiety, right, in any form, oftentimes we think of it as a bad thing or some kind of skewed schema or how we view the world, or as a future tripping is always like worst case scenario, but that's not
Mhm.
necessarily true, right? From what I'm hearing from you, and it's a great reminder for all of us, is that sometimes future tripping can be wrapped up and packaged into a healthy, presumably healthy goal, but it,
Right.
it can have the same implication, right? And that it
Yeah.
robs us of the ability to be present.
Yes. In my case, I unwittingly developed the skill of this sort of future tripping in a positive way as a means of escape or coping with some dissatisfying aspects of my current life. So rather than deal with relationship issues or being present issues or even health related issues, I would sort of put myself in this future version that's better and sort of live
Mm-hmm.
this fantasy in my head of
Mm-hmm.
this better life. And because it was more comfortable there, I'd spend a lot of time there, you know.
Mm.
But then, just like it's very similar to a drug where you might use a drug to escape reality, but the come down from the drug is way worse than where you went in at, you know.
Mm-hmm.
You like use up all those dopamine levels, and then you're crashing harder than before you took the drug. And a lot of times, I think my goal setting fantasies were really a similar mechanism where I would use it as a coping mechanism to set goals and feel better about myself because I've got this positive thing that I'm fantasizing about. But then when I would wake up to reality and realize that I wasn't really doing the work or being effective at achieving those goals, the crash would be even worse than where I had started before. And it's funny because I stumbled upon these ideas myself, just like out of basically a sense of desperation. Like I want out of this cycle of
Mm-hmm.
ups and downs. And so I started thinking of these things myself. And then after that, I began to listen to some of the philosophers like Alan Watts and Ram Dass and
Mm-hmm.
these Western culture people who brought Eastern philosophy uh, to the West. And it's funny because you think of Buddhism and some of these teachings that say, your attachment to specific outcomes is what causes your suffering. And then we're
Mm-hmm.
taught to set a goal that's very time bound and specific. It's like, wow, those
And
things
never
don't
the
seem
twain
to
shall
match
meet,
up.
right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to sort of melt various philosophies together where we can strive for more, and there's nothing wrong with striving for more, but maybe approach it with a sense of wonder and curiosity about, like, if I develop these practices to become this type of person, where will I end up in 2 years? And instead of phrasing it as a time bound specific goal, really phrased it as a sense of wonder, like, what could I achieve if I implement this practice on the daily?
I really like that. I'd like you to say more about that, because something that I personally get caught up in is that contingency thinking that you're talking about. I, you know, or getting caught up in that fantasy, I really want to be present and do X, Y, and Z with my family. But first, I need to finish blank, or I'll make time for
Mhm.
that after blank, or I can't give myself permission to be happy and present until X, Y, or Z is done. Right.
Is achieved.
How
Yeah.
how do you combat that? How do you really reel yourself back in, but not feel like you're, quote, failing,
Hmm.
letting yourself down, um, quitting, right? Because a lot of that stuff comes up for me when I think about, oh, I set this expectation up for myself to whether it's even put out a weekly podcast, right? For
Hmm.
example, something is, as theoretically simple as that can
Hmm.
become encompassing. It takes up a certain percent of RAM in your head, right? The
Yes.
more
Yeah.
commitments we take on, long-term commitments without end, right? Or long-term goals. And so then something usually has to give. And
Right.
if I don't know, I can't speak for other podcasters, but that's something I've tried to work toward, in the last year, is getting more consistent. But that comes
Hmm.
at a cost. Like last night, I'm like, as I'm putting my kid to bed at 10 o'clock, I'm thinking to myself, rubbing her back, and I'm thinking to myself, do I stay up till 2 a.m. and finish this podcast that I meant to launch last Thursday? Or do I practice what I preach, get my 6+ hours of sleep, and then commit to spending some time with my kid tomorrow, and not working the afternoon
Yeah.
because she goes back to school next week? And
Mhm.
I think, as a parent, these are real psychological dilemmas that we set up for ourselves, when we're trying to, quote, improve upon the status quo, right?
Mhm.
Trying to maintain commitments. Mm.
Yeah.
How does
So,
one manage that conflict, do you think?
so one thing that I've done that's helpful, and I certainly don't claim to have all the answers. I usually repeat this over and over, even in my book, that
Mhm.
I'm throwing these ideas out into the world and hoping for feedback so that it's a collaborative effort, because I think that these ideas still need more developing. But to get to your specific question, one thing that I've done is I've really tried to eliminate all goals that are uh, production oriented, and instead look at process oriented goals, and what I call practices, because I just try to get away from the whole goal thing altogether,
Mhm,
because
mhm.
because a goal, I think, brings to mind this flag in the future,
Connotations,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. And so I try to convert what I want to achieve from a goal into a daily practice. So, for instance, on the podcast, I'd like to really be consistent with my podcast as well. And we have an episode coming out every Monday and Wednesday. But what I do is I commit to a certain time block, not an achievement goal.
Mm.
So every afternoon after work, I get home and I edit for 30 minutes. And if I get a lot done or a little done, that's not the point. The point is that I committed to 30 minutes. And so I,
Parameters.
and so I
Mm.
time block those types of parameters. And then people who might push back on that a little bit and say, well, yeah, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get your podcast out on time. Well, the way I work around that is to try to set the bar really low for myself so
Mhm.
that the practice is easy and attainable, and it's something that I know I can commit to 30 minutes. But I'm so far ahead in the queue. I didn't start publishing my podcast until we had almost 2 months worth of podcasts
Oh,
all
smart.
ready
Yeah.
ready to launch. Yeah. And so I can have consistency from my audience perspective of every Monday and every Wednesday, but I'm never pushed up against a hard deadline of stressed out and having to, stay up late or sacrifice time, quality time with another person to achieve that, because I can just stick to my time blocks. And because I've prepared so much in advance, I have 2 months to assess that process. And if I see that the catalog of episodes that I have is dwindling because my practice isn't keeping up with it, then I can adjust my practice time and say, well, maybe I need to do 45 minutes, or maybe I need to do a 2-hour block on a Saturday or something that's just for that. But I have time to assess that because I've built that buffer in.
Excellent. So it's about process, systems, and parameters.
Yes.
Right. Which kind of translates to self-compassion.
Right. Right. Yeah. When I first started writing, I read The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield and some of these books, really amazing books. But a lot of authors have a word count goal for the day. I'm going to write 500 words, 1,000 words, and my butt's not going to move out of the chair until 1,000 words is done, even if they're bad words. And that's somewhat process oriented, but I still think that's a little bit of a production trap, because you're saying that you haven't been effective unless you get to 1,000 words. And 1,000 words from an author's perspective, some days can take 20 minutes because you're just flowing. And other days that could be 3 hours, right?
Doesn't account for writer's block and
right. And
life.
So what
Oh,
so what I try to do,
hurt themselves doing a cartwheel in the backyard. I have to stop what I'm doing.
Right. Yeah. And so what I do is I actually use a timer, and I find a timer to be very effective motivator, because if you intend to sit and write for 30 minutes a day instead of 500 words, I'm committing to 30 minutes. As soon as I see that timer counting down, I hit go on the timer. It's like, ooh, I'm on. There's no procrastination. There's no overthinking it.
Deliberating.
Because the 500 word.
Let's go.
Yeah. With the 500 word goal, I might sit at that computer and not even start typing for 10 minutes. But when I see that clock rolling, it's like, oh, I have 30 minutes. Let's get into this. And it really is an amazing mental shift to get right to the task. And one thing I've discovered about fear, which procrastination is often related to fear. Procrastination could be a lot of things, but fear is one of them, is that fear is very closely related to time. And the shorter you can manage the time you spend thinking about something, the less you're going to fear it. And I learned this on the barbell, actually, learning to clean and jerk and snatch. These are the Olympic weightlifting movements. And it can be a little scary because you're putting a lot of weight overhead in a very dynamic movement. It's a fast, powerful movement. And so once you've practiced that to build up enough weight that it can be dangerous, there's a bit of fear involved.
Sure, I can imagine.
Yeah. And so if you approach the bar and you're spending 10 minutes thinking about this next lift, that fear builds and builds and builds, and you're actually more likely to miss the lift. But if you can visualize a couple of successful reps and then give yourself some sort of cap, I'm going to visualize 2 reps, I'm going to take 3 breaths, and then I'm going, like whether I feel like it's right or not.
I'm squirming just thinking about it. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. But if you really shorten that time that you're allowing yourself to think about it, the fear diminishes. And so I find that timer is a really magic tool for me to get moving on things, not procrastinate, not overthink it, because as soon as that timer's on, I'm doing the practice.
3, 2, 1, go. I would think that has something to do with monotasking, right? That's kind of the catchphrase now, right? Multitasking isn't that effective. Everyone's X% less productive when they try and do more than one thing at a time. But I found that, to your point, even when I sit down to try and monotask something, I still give myself a lot of wiggle room. Oh, let me get up and reheat my coffee. Oh, let me go pet the dog real quick. Oh, I forgot to water the pots outside. Oh, and it's like every 10 minutes I'm squirming out of my chair to go like reset, do something else. But that also resets your flow, right? Yeah. And depending on how your days are structured, sometimes I will let myself off the hook for those kind of things, but I don't count that toward the 30 minutes. So if my practice is 30 minutes, I have to hit pause on the timer. Oh,
I
smart.
go get my coffee, and then that just reminds me that I still have this 23 minute commitment left, so I
Mm-hmm.
need to get back there and get back onto that. And so it still keeps my mind coming back to that task, but it's not so rigid that I can't have a bathroom break or something.
Oh, yes, exactly, exactly. I'm guilty of that sometimes. I'm not going to the bathroom until this is done. Like self punishment. Um, that's true, right? Because when something's forced on us, let's say like in your 9 to 5, my 9 to 5 job, if I have a call to make or something to write up, then I know I have to jump on because I'm on a tight schedule and I've got X number of things that I know are coming at me and X number of things that are going to catch me blindside. So I know there's no room for wiggle room or I'm going to be paying for it all week.
Mhm.
Whereas when we're doing, quote, our own thing or, being your own boss, so to speak, it's sometimes a lot easier to give ourselves justifications to either become overly obsessed or too distracted or procrastinate.
Yeah, yeah. And I've dealt a lot with in my younger life. I figure it was kind of like laziness issues, but I came to realize that a lot of times I was just setting the bar too high in my head. I wanted to jump into a high level of performance from nothing. And there's a first gear in a car for a reason. You can't just start a car in fifth gear. I know everything's automatic nowadays, but I still drive a manual, so it's a good analogy for me. But the point is that I've learned since then to really set the bar low for an entry level of where I want to start my practices. So, for instance, in meditation practices or something like that, if you start with 20 minutes or half an hour, that's going to be a very daunting task for most people who have never meditated. You can actually start a meditation practice with 3 minutes. And it's very difficult to justify not trying for 3 minutes.
It's surprisingly difficult to sit with your own thoughts. Yeah.
Yes. And I'm not saying that you might feel successful in 3 minutes, but to make the time commitment of a 3 minute practice every morning, people can say, well, I don't have time for a morning routine. I work at 6 a.m. or whatever, but it's a little difficult to justify why you can't start a 3 minute practice. It's setting that bar low enough that you practically trip over it. You don't have to jump far. Yeah.
I like that. I love that analogy because when I'm actually trying to be consistent about working out and stuff, I've learned that I have to literally take my dumbbells and put them somewhere where I will trip over them on my path, on my, to my computer or whatever. And, my little home office here or whatever, I'll put them in front of my office chair or someplace inconvenient. So I don't forget. Or I'll have one of the pull-up bar like in front of the drawer, so I have to move it to pull it out. It's like, oh yeah, I didn't do my lifts, didn't do my pull-ups or whatever, 10, whatever.
That's great.
If I don't want to forget my lunch, I'll put my keys in the fridge. I think we all need to habit stack that way.
Yeah.
If something's important, it's like so we can't be out of sight, out of mind sometimes.
Yes.
Simple tricks like that.
Yeah, that's closely related to an idea that I just call reducing friction, because when it comes to developing, especially a new practice like working out or something like that, you don't want to have everything so inaccessible that it's a chore to do the thing. So if you're going to a gym, you want to try to make sure that your clothes and gym bag and a snack or whatever you need after work is in your car, so that you don't have to go home first. Because if you go home first, now you have this big obstacle to overcome to go back to the gym. So the more opportunities you can find in your life to reduce friction, I think we only have so much willpower to go around. It's almost like a budget, and if you can reduce that load of willpower, any opportunity you can get, but still maintain your good practices, then that's a good thing. So the analogy I use a lot is for guitar. I have my guitar hanging on a guitar hanger on the wall, because if it's in its case, that's just enough friction to keep me from picking it up. I'm glad that works
for you.
Right?
I have guitar sitting right here that I've started to learn after like 8 years of being in the garage, but my brother gave it to me. So if my brother's watching this, I have learned to do 2 chords.
Right.
So I bought Simply Piano for my kids because they begged for it for Christmas, and they've used it twice. And I'm like, I'm not going to let it go to waste. And Simply Guitar comes.
Right on.
But yeah, sometimes for me, even if it sits there long enough, it's going to be out of sight because it becomes part of the fixture of the room.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. When I first began to toy with these ideas of the Lyceum method, I actually set an alarm on my phone for some of these practices. And I downloaded an app called Habit Loop, and there's lots of
Mm,
different habit tracking apps.
mm-hmm.
And what I would do is I'd set an alarm for a specific time of day to pick up the guitar. And I set the bar, like I said before, I set it so low, it was 5 minutes. If I pick up the guitar for 5 minutes and just strum a couple chords, whatever, if I'm just doing something on the guitar for 5 minutes, I've met my sort of quota for the day. Now if I'm
Mm-hmm.
having fun and I have the time, I can extend that practice, of course,
Right.
but the 5 minutes is all it takes for a victory to be able to go into the app and say, put the check mark on, I
Mm-hmm.
did it that day. And then
Mm-hmm.
the goal, if you want to use that word goal, is to see how many days in a row I can have a chain of events,
Streak.
like, oh,
Yeah.
I got 12 days.
Mm-hmm.
And if you fall
Right.
off the wagon, you only miss one day. It's like, well, I missed that day, pick up the next day, try it again. But with the use of an alarm, a timer, so you have that 5 minutes, it's only going to be 5 minutes, you can squeeze it in, uh, setting the bar low, and then trying to see how many consecutive days, all those things kind of work together to really start to develop a mindset where you're practicing. And it's really interesting too, the amount of progress you can make in 5 minutes, because
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times we're taught, well, it's 20 minutes minimum if you're going to do anything on purpose, but in the experiment of doing this, I actually set myself up with quite a few practices. I actually had, I think, about a dozen different things that I was doing,
Mm-hmm.
trying to do every day, write and meditate and journal and guitar. And I had these various check things, but each one was such a low barrier that it was hard to find an excuse not to do this thing for 3 minutes, this thing for 5 minutes. But after 2 weeks of doing that, my calluses had returned on my hands, so the guitar didn't hurt anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And within a month, I had gotten back to a level of playing that I hadn't experienced for almost 10 years of sporadic playing before that. So it was really shocking to me, the level of progress you can make with a very, very, very small commitment like that. But I
Mm-hmm.
don't think we realize that, because I feel like we're just taught kind of a hustle culture where if you're not doing this for 3 hours a day, you might as well just not do it. Like, get to work,
Because you're not serious about it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But a little bit done consistently over time can really have dramatic effects.
Oh yeah, I've known that to be true in my life, and I have to remind myself of that all the time. Even though I
Mm-hmm.
talk to clients about that, and the idea of what we call goal pacing, right? If this is your ideal, like let's say go swim, X number of laps at the gym, that's 20 miles away. you know,
Right.
because how many gyms have a pool? Um, you know, and that's your ideal. A lot of people get stuck in all or nothing thinking, black and white.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if I don't have time to do that, then I'm not going to do anything at all because there's nothing planned for, right? But
Right.
in the notion of goal pacing, it's kind of like, well, what's the next best thing? If I can't go to the gym, what's the next best thing? Well, maybe I can go for a run. Well, if I can't go for a run because my back's hurting or whatever excuse we give ourselves, then I can go for a 15-minute walk. And if I can't do a
Yeah,
15-minute walk, what's the next best thing? Well, I can do some jumping jacks in my living room.
absolutely. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that's very closely aligned to what you're talking about, removing friction, which is also planning for um, a rhythm, right?
Mm-hmm.
Making sure the rhythm's not disrupted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we underestimate the power of those small things. A few jumping jacks in the living room. If you find yourself doing that day after day, you might be surprised how your cardiovascular system improves even from just a small intentional
Oh,
act
right.
like that, but done
Yeah,
consistently. Yeah.
absolutely. And like you were saying, once we get moving with something, we tend to feel motivated then to to continue. It's that whole
Mm-hmm.
law of inertia, right? A body in motion tends to stay in motion. A body at rest tends to stay at rest, and that's so true. I think that also holds true for our train of thought,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Once we
Absolutely.
commit to a direction, our mind, for better or worse, will often it'll flow that direction, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. I've begun to think of uh, the way that we think a lot of times as grooves, that the more you do it, the deeper the groove gets. And sometimes that can even lead to pathology. Now, I'm speaking out of turn because you're much more educated on this specific topic than I am, but in reading things like How the Brain Changes Itself
Mm-hmm.
and The Power of Habit by Duhigg,
Mm-hmm.
and these types of books really illustrate how we can direct a thought once, and if we repeat that way of thinking long enough, it becomes sort of an autopilot that's
Right.
a runaway train out of our control. And for better or worse, like you say, it can be in either direction. Um, but that's another practice that I try to implement is a morning routine where there might be some meditation, and I have a specific journaling prompt that I use in the Lyceum Method, which starts with gratitude, uh, because that to me brings me into the present.
Mm-hmm.
I'm remembering that things are pretty good now, and then it goes into a vision for what I want in the future, and then affirmations of the person I need to be for that future, and then a single action that I can take today to bring me closer to the vision. So just that action line has to be simple. It can't be a to-do list. It's one thing that's going to bring me closer to that vision today.
I like that, because too many even well-intended ideas in our head or commitments can sometimes make, like you said, add friction, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so keeping it very simple. I was kind of practicing that this morning as I was trying to enjoy my coffee in the front lawn, and I was doing some stretches, and I was just kind of saying out loud to myself what I was grateful for
That's
as
great.
I was
Yeah.
stretching. I'm grateful for my health. I'm grateful for my family. I'm grateful for my dogs, ones which I don't know if you can see him, but he's sleeping on the
Yeah,
couch.
I saw that. Yeah.
Hi. Say hi. um, and I think that is very, very, very important, and keeping it, not overthinking it, right?
Yeah. And I think one way that I've related it to this whole idea that I have of like, this is a groove and it's going to become a rut kind of thing is sort of going back to the beginning of our conversation, where when you have a specific goal that's way out in the future, the idea of delayed gratification is often taught as sort of this moral standard that we should all be trying to achieve. But sometimes delayed gratification can also present itself as I'll be happy when. And you get in this habit of I'll be happy when I lose 20 pounds. I'll be happy when I am making six figures or whatever. Uh, but the thing that we don't realize is that if we're not practicing gratitude and being present and being happy, when we achieve that goal, our mindset will not have changed because we'll have developed a habit, a groove, a rut of not being grateful and not being present. So the thing won't change that. The $100,000 or the girlfriend or the 20 pounds lost or whatever is not going to change the way that we are used to thinking. And so one of my objectives with my method is to try to develop practices now of living present and grateful and happy so that when I do achieve the things that I want to achieve in the future, I'm already in that mode of, oh, I'm so great. I'm so grateful to be here. I'm present with my relationships. And these are habits and practices that I've been doing all along the way instead of delaying happiness for the goal. Yeah.
The mantra I sometimes use is I've already won.
Yeah.
I've already won. Everything else is kind of like a Monopoly game.
Yeah. Yeah.
But to your point, there's a lot of science behind what you're talking about. And the actual name for that is dendrites. Those grooves you're talking about are dendrites. And it's a legitimate thing. Our thoughts literally, it's like roads. Like if it's like if you're on a hiking trail and you're going down a road that, the same trail everybody else takes, it doesn't take that much resistance. You're just going to naturally follow. But if you want to venture off onto create a new path, it's going to be a lot of work, and your body's not going to want to go. It's not going to do the work. You got to hack your way through it. And eventually over time, the two paths look similar, and your thought process will fight you less on taking the new beaten path. But it takes, like you said, a lot of repetition, to form those new dendrites. And it is, as you say, a conscious effort to catch ourselves, to direct our thoughts. And one of the most powerful things is gratitude.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then just relating that to that low barrier of entry, I think
Mm-hmm.
it's magic. It's like magic because we can start to shift that daily practice of thought and the dendrites, like you're talking
Yes.
about,
Yeah.
but just with very small effort. Just I'm just going to write one thing I'm grateful for today in my journal, and if you need a reminder in your phone to do that, or
Mm-hmm.
something to trigger that at first, if it's not a habit, but set the bar low enough so you're not thinking, well, I have to come up with 10 things, or I have to spend this amount of time, or set the bar real low, and that just begins to snowball into the new path that's is better trodden, and it's that
Yeah.
path is getting easier and easier the longer you do it consistently. So that's really the
Mm-hmm.
key, is just to start with something that's so easy that you almost can't help but do it consistently, because there's just no
Right.
excuse to
It
to
really
not.
is. I mean, it's a lot to that. Even the Apple Watch, since I got mine for my last birthday, every, night, like at 11 o'clock, because I usually go to bed around midnight, unless I'm not loving myself and I want to be up late editing a
Yeah,
podcast. It'll remind you, it's like ding ding, take a moment to be mindful. It's like something as simple as that may seem like, really, do I need a reminder for that? Yes, I do.
yeah,
Yes,
absolutely.
I do.
Yeah,
Otherwise, it's just I'm gonna keep flipping the TV channel, or I'll be finding some more work to do, or something is going to demand my attention.
yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
I think that really speaks to me too about the power of a morning routine,
Mhm.
because most of us don't have a lot of distractions when we first wake up.
Mhm.
Some of us may be getting ready for work, but right now I'm still working at a job uh, for another 2 months, and then I'll be quitting that job to go full time in our
Ooh,
business. But
congrats.
thanks.
Big deal.
But in the meantime, my job is really early, so I feel like it's an opportunity for me to walk the walk for my clients and say, "Hey, I know what
Mm-hmm.
you're going through,"
Mm-hmm.
because I get up at 4:30 or 4:45 in the morning in order to have the morning routine that I need. And so that includes just a 10-minute meditation, journaling with the Lyceum Method prompts that I described. And then I
Mm-hmm.
go and work out in the gym for 30 to 60 minutes. And then I just have enough time to get ready to go to work. And the thing I found for myself is, if that's not in the morning, it doesn't get done. And if it does get
Mm-hmm.
done, it doesn't get done consistently. But if I build it as part of the start of my day, not only does it set me up well for the day, just feel good that I've accomplished those things. Exercise makes you feel good, makes you sleep better at night when you exercise in the
Mm-hmm.
morning. Like
Mm-hmm.
uh, lots of different aspects to the intention behind each part of that morning routine that I have. But the one thing that it does really is it just builds consistency. It's a low
Mm-hmm.
barrier for consistency, because as long as I can, get my butt up out of bed, that's really the only hard part. And then the rest
Mm-hmm.
of that
Isn't that
can
the
be
truth?
can
Yeah.
just sort of flow. And then I know I've done it for the day. Where if I wait till after work, I definitely have the time after work, because I'm home fairly early in the afternoon, having such an early schedule. But boy, I
Willpower.
think, yeah, well, we forget, I think, when we're budgeting time, we can sit down with a planner and you're budgeting time, and we totally forget that we need to budget energy. You only have so much energy in the day.
Yes.
And if you're not budgeting energy, I'm so guilty of this for so long, that I would schedule 15-minute blocks all throughout my whole day, and on paper, it's great. It looks
Mm-hmm.
logical. It looks fine. I've even built in some breaks here and there, and it looks like it should all work. But I was totally unprepared for the fact that by 3 p.m. I'm bunking and distracted and can't think
Yes.
right. And yeah.
You wrote a great article on that. Actually, I was reading it this morning. I was checking out
Oh,
your website, Live All Your Life. You had a blog post on that particular subject, I believe. And what are the most valuable resources? And guess what? Time management isn't the only one. It's your energy.
yeah,
I believe you said it was
yeah.
your attention, right? What do we give our attention to, and factoring in not just time, but our mood, right?
Hmm.
Anticipating our moods. Yeah.
Right, which is really difficult to do. And you just reminded me of another thing, not to just bash goals the whole hour here, but but my thought on goal setting can sometimes be that we we sometimes are not very good judges of what future us really wants, because we really don't know. People who are going to come into our lives, people who talk about a 5-year plan for something. I'm always like,
Mm-hmm.
I wonder, who are you going to meet in the next 5 years? Are you still going to have the same relationships that you have? Are you still going to have the same career path? We live in a really dynamic world these days. That just opportunities and information coming at us just like an overwhelming ocean wave coming at us all the time. So to think that we will know exactly what we want in a very specific way for a goal that's a year out or 2 years out, I think it's a really tough mark to hit because
Mm-hmm.
I know from my experience now that I'm 47, I feel like I've lived long enough to have
Mm-hmm.
some say in like what this pattern is, that I would think I knew what I wanted 5 years from now. And looking back, it's like sometimes I'm glad I didn't achieve some of the things that
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to achieve, because
Right. Amen
it's
to
like,
that.
wow,
Yeah.
my association, my religious beliefs, my philosophy on life, my politics, all kinds of things have shifted and changed over the last 20, 30 years. And
Mm-hmm.
so sometimes we're not very good judge of what we want in the future.
Yeah. Reminds me of that saying, life is what happens while you're making other plans, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I say
Well,
set goals, but understand it's a moving target. And what you want
yeah.
now may be different than what you want later, but it is important to be moving
Yes.
in a
Yes.
meaningful direction.
Yeah, and that's why in my journal prompts, I have vision on there instead of goals, because I like to imagine a vision of a more optimal life for myself and know that
Mm-hmm.
I'm on a trajectory that's toward those values, but they're broad values. They're not as specific as a goal. And I allow them to shift without any guilt. So in my journaling process of if since it's a daily imagining, you can compare my journal from now to 2 years ago. It's not going to look the same, but I've allowed myself to shift that vision along with my own personal growth. And so there's no guilt that I didn't hit a goal or that I missed over that or that I quit or anything like that. It's just that my trajectory is always going toward my current vision for what I feel I want. And amazingly, I've made more progress doing that than I did setting specific goals,
Yes, I
even though
believe
it
that
sounds
because we
counterintuitive.
tend to think in pictures anyway. I do
Mm-hmm.
anyway. And I do try and paint a picture, a vision, a kind of movie clips in my head of what it is that I value and what I want in life, including my future. That's a beautiful thing about being human, right? We have this mind's
Mm-hmm.
eye where we can use our imagination and line that up with our desires and try and create something that we can then move toward, right? I do believe everything's created twice, right? First in our mind and then our
Mm-hmm.
actions, right? Kind of like an
Yeah.
artist. You'd know, I'm not an artist, but you like to sketch, right? You have to kind of imagine
Yeah.
to some extent what it is that you are imagining before you sketch it, right?
Yes. Yeah. And that really circles back to exactly what I was just talking about. And that's a perfect analogy because as an artist, and I think anyone who is an artist can relate to this analogy, when you sit down to create a piece of art, you do have this imagining of what you're about to start to create first. But the moment my pencil touches the paper, there's a disconnect between what's actually on the
Mhm.
paper and what's in my mind. And when I was a kid, I used to think of that as, well, I'm just not a good enough artist. I'm just not
Mm.
able to produce what I want to produce because I don't have the skills. But
Mhm.
a few years back, I read a book by Elizabeth Gilbert called Big Magic. And in there, she describes that art is really a relationship like between you and your muse. And she kind of
Mm.
personifies this idea. And I don't necessarily buy into the personification of it, but even as a concept, it really makes a lot of sense that the reason that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, the reason that saying is true is that when you put things together, there's the parts, but then there's the relationship between those parts. And that's the multiplying factor. That's why the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, because there's a multiplying factor of all the relationships between the parts. And with art, as soon as I begin to draw, it's different than what I intended. Sometimes it's pretty close. It might be the same person, for instance, if I'm drawing a
Mhm.
face, and it might be recognizable and acceptable, but maybe the lighting is shifted or the texture that I had envisioned is slightly different. But sometimes, now that I'm a little more mature, I can look at that art and say, that's actually better than what I had thought
Mm-hmm.
it was going to be. Like I can be proud of that, even though it's not quite what I had in my mind's eye when I started the drawing. But the relationship between me and the drawing developed, and I allowed that to develop. I actually had a wise grade school teacher, and his first name was Art, Art
Mm-hmm.
Payne,
Funny.
who taught me this because I was so frustrated. I'd start to draw something, crumple it up, and throw it away, and he just saw me struggling over and over, just all these crumpled papers around me, and almost I had tears. I was just so frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
And he
Mm-hmm.
said, "Why don't you just finish one, even if you hate it? Just finish. Don't erase anything. Don't throw it away. Just finish the drawing." And when I was done, it was like the best drawing I had ever done up to that point. And I was so proud of it. And everybody in class was like, "Oh, wow, you drew that." And it was like, "Oh, okay. So it doesn't have to be perfect. It's just
Mm-hmm.
that art has flaws." And I approach my vision for the future in the same way, that it's a relationship between me and the real world. So I can imagine this sort of perfect day, but my relationships with my wife and the land that we live on and our local community and my clients and all of these things can be allowed to play a role in shaping that vision. And I can
Mm-hmm.
approach it with a sense of wonder, like I wonder how this is going to turn out, as long as I know
Mm-hmm.
I've got the right trajectory and I'm working toward it.
Uh, that's really insightful. So, just to kind of reframe that, so life is not does not always have to be a mirror reflection of our ideals,
Mm-hmm.
but it should be congruent with our
Yes.
values.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the term trajectory because
Yeah.
the vision can change and move a little bit, but you can just kind of shift toward that newer version of that. And as long as you feel like you're on the right trajectory, there's a sense of victory. Like I'm going the right
Mm-hmm.
way. I'm making progress, and progress feels good.
Yes.
Yeah. But it
Uh,
takes some fluidity and some willingness to approach life with a little curiosity. So
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
and another thing that has another concept that I play with in this whole big realm of ideas is the idea of things like curiosity and wonder as being life skills. Those are not necessarily things. I mean, we are inherently born with those, but they
Mm-hmm.
can be developed. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so the more you can approach things with curiosity, the more you can develop it as a skill, and it actually becomes fun. And I think meditation taught me that because I was in a guided meditation where he was saying, like if you're having a hard time focusing on your breath, approach it with a sense of curiosity. Is this
Mm-hmm.
breath longer than the last one? Is this breath shallower than the last one? Is there more space between this breath and the last one? Do you feel this one more in your chest or your stomach or your nose? And if you're asking questions and becoming curious about something as mundane as a breath after breath after breath, then you
Yeah.
can develop a skill of being curious about just about anything.
Absolutely. And I do believe that is a superpower that anyone can learn.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm working with clients, especially those dealing with very rigid thought processes around depression and anxiety, and just, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the negative self talk that comes with that, a lot of the worry, I remind them, a thought is either a statement or it's a question. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's a statement or a question. And if you can shift from having less statements and more questions, AKA being curious, right, you're going to have a lot less anxiety and depression as a result, because you're going to become more inquisitive.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have an open mind to possibilities, as opposed to getting attached to your predetermined notions about the self, about how the world works, and how you relate to the world.
Yeah, and you bring up a good
Right.
point with talking about the self, because I think when we are rigid in those types of thinkings, they become part of our identity. You know,
Mm-hmm.
another thing I learned in a guided meditation was being able to look at your feelings in different uh, perspectives. And so you start with the mantra that I am sad. And that's a very much an identity statement, right? I
Mm-hmm.
am sad.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can say, well, I feel sad. And then there's just one step of removal there that, oh,
Absolutely.
this is a feeling I have. It's not me. And then you can even go one step further back and say, I recognize that I'm feeling sad.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can go back further and say, I'm okay with the recognition that I feel sad. And so
Mm-hmm.
it allows you to both be in touch with that feeling, but it's not an identifier. And so,
Yes.
yeah, I think that kind of relates to that sense of curiosity. Well, why is this happening? But it's not, why is this happening to me like a victim? It's like, well,
Mhm.
you know, what will this look like 10 minutes from now or tomorrow? This
Mhm.
is a fluid thing. This isn't I
Absolutely.
am sad. It's just I feel sad right now,
Mhm.
and that's just right now.
Absolutely.
And yeah,
Very fluid
yeah,
indeed. Learning to not chase down or be too attached to our thoughts or feelings, but understand that how we feel now is different than how we're going to feel even maybe 5 minutes from now or a week from
yeah,
now, a year from
yeah.
now. Right.
And it's not necessarily us.
Right.
Yeah, there's an us that's bigger than that feeling. Yeah,
Yes. It's just a state of being. Yeah.
yeah.
So, yeah, personal development is a very deep well.
It is, which is fun. Which is fun, right?
Yes.
Because
Yes, it is.
it never ends. There's always something more to
Right.
explore and to see what we can do
Yeah.
to both level up, but also be cultivating the skill of contentment.
Yes. That's the goal, to be content in all things. Right.
Yeah,
But not complacent. So, contentment
right.
is not complacency.
Absolutely.
Learning to be content is crucial.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Crucial. Content in
Yeah.
all things. Yes.
Yeah. And I think it's a practice. I think it's a learned skill that we can develop. And we have, forces out there that are trying to take that from us. The hustle
Mm-hmm.
culture is just one of them, but
Mm-hmm.
almost every advertisement in the world is trying to get you to feel unsatisfied, right?
Yes.
Every
Absolutely.
marketing genius out there wants to make you uncomfortable with where you are so that you'll buy the thing that they're
Well,
selling.
because that gets our attention, and everything's
Yeah,
competing for our attention. Everything.
right.
Yeah.
So I think it's a skill that we can intentionally develop to feel some contentment. And then, it's pretty amazing because that can not only carry over into just general better feelings in life, but it could actually help your budget, help you
Oh
to
yeah.
resist buying
Absolutely.
those things.
Yeah.
Can help with your
Try to fill a
relationships.
void. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Being intentional with our attention. Yes.
Yes. Mhm.
I like it. So the is it the Lyceum method? That's how we pronounce it, right?
Lyceum. Yeah. And
Lyceum. The Lyceum
yeah,
method.
I actually like to say Lyceum because that actually
Lyceum.
is like the ancient Greek version.
I like that.
But for some
Sounds
reason,
cooler too. Lyceum.
yeah, but for some reason, I don't know, Americans or Western culture in general, they like to convert things to English pronunciations, even if it's in a different language. So
Right.
the dictionary says Lyceum is how you pronounce it. But yeah, that was Aristotle's school. And I'm just a fan of Aristotle because he was a polymath, and I don't claim to be a polymath. I'm more like a dilettante, just like got my hands on a lot of different things, but maybe not an expert in any of them. But
Right.
he had a gym in the center of his school. And
Hmm.
most people might not be aware of this, but he was known
Yeah, I
as the
wasn't. That's
walking
cool.
yeah, he was the walking philosopher, and he would
Mhm.
walk his students around a hallway around the gym and look at the athletes, and he would use the athletes as an example of developing practices to live a life of excellence. And so his quote is in our gym. This is my gym shirt that I have on here.
Yeah.
Is life is or excellence is an art that's won through training and habit, and that
Mhm.
was Aristotle's quote. And then he also had like a zoo and an atrium and all these things to study biology. And we live on a ranch and we are doing all this gardening. So just to kind of live
Yes.
everything in one basket, like I said, the
That's
Lyceum
cool.
made a lot of sense for us. So that's
Yeah,
what, yeah.
absolutely. And so, where can our listeners go to find out more about you and your work and personal development?
Well, since we're on the podcast, the simplest thing they can do right now is just on whatever podcast they're on right now is just head over to the Lyceum Network, and that's Lyceum. That's how you spell Lyceum. And the
Hmm.
Lyceum Network podcast will have various series of podcasts all within one feed. So my wife and I have a podcast right now called The Philosophy of Fitness, where we take life lessons like I described earlier. I described the
Hmm.
relationship between time and fear and how I learned that at the barbell. And we just extrapolate that into a series of podcasts on different um, personal development approaches through fitness. Uh, I'm also reading my book for free on that podcast. So my
Hey,
book
that's
is
cool.
called, yeah,
Yeah.
my book is called Stop Setting Goals, Learn the Lyceum Method to achieve more, stress less, and love all your life. And it's a terrible title. It's probably the worst title of any book ever written. But for some reason,
it makes sense. I love it.
I had an easy time writing the book, and I just, for some reason, could not come up with a great title. But anyway, before releasing that as an audiobook, I decided to just go ahead and give it away for free in segments as part of the podcast. So they can listen to it there. Or if they want to purchase it, of course, they can go to Amazon and find the book there.
I love that. True Pat Flynn style. Give it away.
There you go. And then, of course, our website is liveallyourlife.com. But you can find that easy enough if you just head over to our podcast.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And your website, Live All Your Life?
Yes, liveallyourlife.com.
Excellent. I'm going to share that with everyone in case they're watching this on YouTube.
Awesome.
Let's jump over here. There we go. This is your website, right?
Yes, that's the website, and there's the book.
Hey, I love your book cover. That is so savvy.
Thanks.
For anyone watching, it's a stoplight, and it has different. I'm not gonna spoil it for you. You have to go check it out. But it's a cool book cover.
Thanks. Appreciate that.
I like it. Very neat. And you have courses. Thought I saw at the bottom here.
Yeah. So to be honest, the website needs a little bit of updating. So I'll go ahead and update your audience now. My wife and I are starting a course in January. We'll be taking applications beginning in October for that course. And it's the Lyceum course that'll be a 90-day, you'll get a course journal that lasts for 90 days that guides you through the prompts that I had described: gratitude, affirmations, and vision, and an action step for the day. Developing practices. Pretty much everything we just discussed in this podcast is going to be taught, but it's also a fitness program. So my wife and I are going to be providing a daily workout and nutrition counseling, one-on-one attention. It's a really in-depth 90-day.
How cool is that? It doesn't get any more hands-on than that. That's really neat.
Yeah.
I love that. Excellent. Wonderful. And I know you've got a blog on here. You said it hasn't been touched in a while, but some really good articles I was thumbing through this morning, actually. This is a good one.
Thank you.
So
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Very cool.
So the 1st of November, I'll be full-time back in our business. So everyone can expect the newsletter and the blog and all that kind of thing to be updated more frequently as we get ready to launch that course.
They can sign up for that right here on the homepage, right?
Yes.
The newsletter. Excellent. Very cool. And I was doing some other poking around, and you have a YouTube channel too, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Super.
Right now there's
hiding that under a rock. You should have led with that. That's cool.
Again, it's a little hit and miss as far as consistency on that. Right now we're using it as a catalog for exercise demos. So that
I see that, which is great.
Yeah. So when we prescribe an exercise to a remote client, we actually demo it for them and can answer questions, and we just go ahead and put it up on YouTube for everybody to learn from. So
super cool. I love that.
My wife Tali, they're giving some coaching cues, and yeah.
All right, excellent. You make your work very accessible, which is fantastic. Really appreciate that.
Good.
So, all right. Well, I'll be sure to link up to all of that in the show notes. Are you on any socials, Instagram or?
I'm going to be launching a series on TikTok that's going to be pretty fun. I'm going to be actually launching a workout of the day for free, just kind of giving out a workout that people can do with just a sandbag or a jump rope or less. So it's meant to be equipment that you can travel with. And so I call it work travel fitness, which is WTF for short.
Yes.
And
I like it.
And so that'll be on TikTok, and I am on Instagram. You can find me at Live All Your Life on Instagram with an underscore between each word. So Live All Your Life.
How fun. Yeah. Thank you so much, Cody. I really appreciate you coming on today and sharing your words of wisdom and your life experience. And I can't wait to hear more. And if you're game, I'd love to have you back on down the road to give us an update.
Absolutely. Yeah, maybe after our course, I'll have some things to share that we learned from our community. So I would love that. Yeah.
All right.
Look forward appreciate your time and the invitation. It's been a great chat.
Oh yeah. Likewise. Keep me posted.
Right on. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Well, there you have it. Another tool to help you thrive. Hey, if you're getting value from this content and you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe to the MHT newsletter. That way you will be notified of new content as it's released, and I'll send it straight to your inbox. Also, please be sure to subscribe to both the YouTube channel and podcast. It helps to raise mental health awareness, and please do share with friends and family. All right, so until next time, keep thriving and make good things happen. Bye-bye.